Hello, my name is President Christina Grappo, and today I will be discussing the Human Trafficking Defense. The article is Two Men Beat San Francisco Drug Dealing Charges After Lawyers Argue They Were Human Trafficking Victims. There are two criminal cases that juries have concluded about in the article. In a December trial, the first defendant told the jury that he had crossed the Mexican US border in 2017 with the help of a coyote, a drug smuggler whom he promised to pay $12,350 once he was situated. The defendant testified under oath he painted and installed floors in a large southern US city for years, but the pay was slow and low, and the coyote grew increasingly demanding. Eventually, the defendant said he moved to Oakland, where the coyote told him directly that he would work with his friend to complete more construction work. After the defendant arrived, the friend told him he would actually be selling drugs instead. The defendant said he thought he did not have a choice between the man in Oakland and the coyote, now in Honduras, were in communication with one another. Furthermore, while drug dealing, he never got to keep his earnings and had to turn everything over to the coyote's friend who gave him shelter. Together, the men threatened his family. If you don't sell the drugs, remember you have a family. Remember, we know where they live, the defendant restated. Although the defendant was able to pay off some of his debt, he still owed $9,500 at the time of the trial. During the trial, Assistant District Attorney Angela Rose provided evidence that the defendant was not truly a victim of human trafficking by possessing a $6,000 car, not being forced to sell drugs, and having a phone to regularly speak with his family in Honduras. The jury in the first defendant's case was unable to reach a unanimous decision concerning his drug dealing, with 10 voted for not guilty and 2 for guilty, due to the defendant having a human trafficking defense as a victim. At the second trial in January, another defendant accused of selling drugs told a similar story. Also a Honduran national, the defendant stated he crossed the U.S. border from Mexico with the help of a coyote who said he would help the defendant find legitimate work. However, after arriving in Oakland in 2018, the defendant said his coyote placed him in an apartment with several other people, told him he was part of a cartel, and coerced him to sell drugs against his will. The defendant was told specifically, "You know who we are. You know that we are the same people." The defendant testified, "You know that you must do what we're telling you to do." The defendant testified that the coyote initially told him it would cost $15,000 to cross the border, and that his take-home pay was about $200 a week as a drug dealer. He told jurors threats to his family in Honduras were constant, and a cartel connection had visited them there. In cross-examination, prosecutors challenged the defendant's claim that he was forced into selling drugs when he left Honduras in 2018 due to his prior conviction of selling drugs in San Francisco in 2014. The defendant responded that he was tricked into coming to the USA once again. Prosecutors also challenged the claim that the defendant accrued only $200 a week, pointing to a time he contacted his Oakland-based sister from jail to ask her to retrieve money from his home. $3,000 was there, the prosecutor said, and the defendant had asked his sister to use it to pay for a mechanic for his car and to send money all the way home to Honduras. The defendant defended himself by saying those particular funds consisted of money he still owed but needed to pay for essentials. The second trial also resulted in a hung jury weighted more heavily in favor of the prosecution. 9 members of the jury voted that he was guilty, and 3 that the defendant was not guilty. Currently, San Francisco's sanctuary city laws preclude the city's law enforcement agencies from cooperating with federal immigration officials and deportation. Supporters continue to argue people would be more forthcoming to assist local law enforcement and prosecutors if they felt they were not constantly under such threat of deportation. Both of the mentioned cases turned out to be hung juries, with many juries on the side of the immigrant due to the tremendous testimony from experts and the immigrants themselves of being trafficked. It is unclear whether future drug defendants will use the human trafficking defense in trials, even though this defense allows more justice. It is also uncertain whether specific instructions concerning victims of human trafficking will be publicly made available to jurors. In recent news headlines of July 2023, Honduran drug dealers claimed to flock to San Francisco due to extreme easy conditions through sanctuary city laws. Something to think about. The prosecution perspectives include prosecutors have decided not to retry either case and dismiss the charges, even though they both seem to funnel money and defendant number 2 was a repeat offender. Despite choosing not to push forward with the cases, San Francisco prosecutors forcefully rejected the idea that the defendants had no choice but to sell drugs to make a living. In an interview, District Attorney Brooke Jenkins said the two defendants had autonomy that isn't afforded to victims of sex or labor trafficking. They had cell phones and cars and were allowed freedom of movement. Jenkins simply stated owing a debt, even if it is from the creditors, threatening violence against the debtor is not equivalent to trafficking. In the drug trade, there are always people who are high up who have said, hey, you better not snort my coke. You better not give it away. You better sell it. You owe me money. If you don't pay me the money, there are consequences, Jenkins said. High-ranking members of criminal organizations are interested in the money, Jenkins said, not in the fact that you're standing out on the corner. Prosecutors also detrimentally relied on the testimony of San Francisco police officer Christina Hayes. Law enforcement officials contend the drug dealing from coyote smugglers in these cases was voluntary, a way to profit immensely from the suffering of San Franciscans struggling with drug addiction, and not a way to combat duress or victimization. Officer Christina Hayes, a veteran narcotics officer who testified on the witness stand that she spoke to dealers who revealed they were building large homes in Honduras with the money they earned between $200 and $1,000 a day. Hayes said evidence collected through surveillance, wiretaps, and undercover drug purchases does not support claims of trafficking in persons. Suspects post social media videos drinking beers around Lake Merritt. Some of them are smoking marijuana, and they are basically listening to music, and it looks like a party scene, she said. It doesn't look like people are worried or being threatened. Hayes said she often has friendly, off-the-record conversations with dealers, and that many will tell her about their families, why they're selling drugs, and why the money is so important to them. It's never about being coerced or MS-13 is out to get them, and they have to sell these drugs right away. During the trial, Hayes said she had never heard any mid-level or street-level dealers say anything on a wiretaped recording about being threatened that would occur if they didn't sell drugs. Under questioning from the defense attorney, Hayes stated she had no formal training on how to identify victims of human trafficking, though. Now, some deductions from criminal law lessons that we had are the following. Drug dealing is a statutory crime with its own rendition for the state of California, but the Honduran drug dealers mentioned in the article may not have had the correct liability to attach. In other words, the two men may not have had the mens rea to intentionally commit the actus reus crime of drug dealing. As victims of human trafficking, the two examples are under duress from a coyote and a cartel, threatening to hurt their families if they did not comply with their illegal work. Not only that, they have each a forced bondage of owing the coyote drug smuggler a sum of money without being able to ascertain legitimate work that pays off the debt, is that which occurs in the forced labor aspect of human trafficking. Overall, I believe that the human trafficking defense levels the playing field by awarding more American justice to the criminal justice system. Amen. As far as the works cited goes, Cassidy wrote the article that I wrote about and presented, and the other works cited include Department of Homeland Security, Wikimedia, Hamid, and Downey. So that said, enough said for today. I hope that we're able to continue on with the Human Trafficking Defense.